Welcome the Lord's chosen. Nothing haunts a liar more than someone who refuses to break. There's a strange kind of silence that follows you when people finally realize the story they wrote about you doesn't match the person you actually are. And sometimes, instead of correcting themselves, they double down, hard. In fact, according to behavioral psychology, once someone commits to a false belief, they're more likely to intensify it rather than admit they were wrong. Which explains why some people will spend years, yes, literal years, trying to prove a version of you that never existed. 8 years, though. That's not investigation. That's a subscription. A full season membership with renewal reminders. But here's where it gets unsettling and a little funny. While they were busy analyzing your life like a Netflix documentary no one asked for, you were outgrowing every theory they had about you. Their research was outdated before they even started, and their assumptions aged like bananas in the sun. Yet they kept digging, kept asking the same questions, kept lurking in shadows they created, hoping one day you'd slip and confirm their imagination. Spoiler alert, you didn't. What they never expected was that the very thing they were hunting was actually happening to them. They weren't uncovering you. They were exposing their obsession, their insecurity, and their fear that maybe, just maybe, you were never the person they needed you to be in their story. And that right there, that's where this gets interesting. Because when someone spends nearly a decade chasing a ghost version of you, the real question isn't what did you do? It's what does your existence reveal that they can't handle? And trust me, the answer isn't soft, polite, or comfortable. It's raw. It's revealing. And yes, it's a little bit hilarious watching people trip over their own narratives while trying to track yours. So buckle up. This isn't just a topic. It's an unmasking. A deep dive into what really happens when people hunt you not for truth, but for confirmation of the lies they told themselves. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why they spent 8 years chasing nothing and still couldn't catch you. Number 1, they didn't hunt you. They hunted their own projection. The truth is, their 8-year obsession had nothing to do with who you really are. They weren't trying to understand you. They were trying to protect themselves from a version of you that only existed in their imagination. People don't investigate facts. They investigate fears. And once they created a story about you, they became emotionally invested in proving it right. That's why their focus wasn't on reality, but on digging up clues that matched the storyline in their head. It's not that they saw danger in you. It's that they projected their own insecurities onto you and then reacted to that projection like it was a real threat. Their hunt was simply a reflection of their inner world. They accused you of what they feared in themselves. They searched for the flaws they were running from. They analyzed your life because they didn't have the courage to analyze their own. And the more you continued living without matching their expectations, the more determined they became to force you into the shape that fit their narrative. They needed you to be guilty so they could stay comfortable. They needed you to be the problem so they didn't have to fix themselves. You became a living challenge to the lies they told themselves. If you turned out to be a stable, honest, grounded person, their whole judgment system would collapse. So instead of adjusting their mindset, they convinced themselves that there must be something hidden, something wrong, something strange, something worth chasing. Their projection didn't allow room for your innocence. It didn't allow room for you to grow, change, or evolve. It only allowed you to be the character they invented, even when reality kept proving otherwise. And the funniest part is, the longer they hunted you, the more they exposed what was wrong with them, not you. Their obsession revealed their fear, their ego, their paranoia, and their need for control. They weren't uncovering truth. They were unraveling themselves. You didn't break their story. The truth did. You didn't fight for your name, your consistency did. And they never realized that while they spent 8 years chasing a fantasy, you kept becoming a person their projections could never keep up with. Number 2, you became the mirror they weren't ready to face. The hardest thing for people to deal with isn't someone doing them wrong. It's someone showing them exactly what they themselves refuse to see. You didn't create drama, lie, or play games. You didn't need validation or permission. You simply existed with honesty, boundaries, and growth, and that reflected back to them everything they were avoiding in their own lives. That's why they spent 8 years obsessing over you. Not because you were dangerous or guilty, but because you were unavoidable. You became a mirror they weren't prepared to face. Every step you took in clarity, resilience, or self-possession highlighted their stagnation. Every decision you made that was aligned with integrity exposed their compromises. Their hunt wasn't about proving anything about you. It was about proving to themselves that they weren't failures, that they weren't inadequate, that they were still in control. But every attempt to corner you only reminded them how much of their own life was wasted on fear, envy, and petty judgments. The more they searched, the more they saw their weaknesses reflected in the way they obsessed, lied to themselves, and overanalyzed every detail of your existence. You weren't an enemy, yet they treated you like one. Because the truth is that people often attack what they admire, or what they secretly fear they could never be. Your growth, your calm under pressure, your consistency, and your authenticity became unbearable because it made them uncomfortable with their own mediocrity. They needed a target to distract from the reality that they hadn't done the work to evolve themselves. In chasing you, they weren't uncovering evidence of wrongdoing. They were confronting the unspoken reality that you had what they lacked: freedom, clarity, and a life unshackled by ego. Every hour, every plan, every wasted moment they spent on you revealed less about you and more about the reflection they refused to acknowledge. And while they were busy staring into that mirror, you weren't frozen. You kept moving forward, growing, and becoming exactly who they secretly feared to become themselves. That is the paradox. Your existence wasn't their crime. It was their confrontation. Number 3, your absence made you more dangerous than your presence. There's a power in not being where people expect you to be. You didn't fight, argue, or even justify yourself, and that silence terrified them more than any confrontation ever could. When someone spends 8 years hunting for you, it's rarely about what you did. It's about what your absence exposes. They expected to see you stumble, to catch you off guard, to provoke a reaction that would fit neatly into the story they told themselves. Instead, your life kept moving forward without them, without validation, without explanation. And that made you unpredictable in the most uncomfortable way. People fear what they cannot measure. When you disappear from the narrative they controlled, when you refuse to respond to their attempts at manipulation or drama, you become a variable they cannot calculate. That absence turns into a magnifying glass on their own insecurities. Every day you lived unbothered, every boundary you held, every step you took outside their sphere of influence was a silent statement. They didn't own you, and no amount of obsession could change that. Your absence forced them to confront their need for control. They chased your ghost because they couldn't handle the reality that you existed outside their reach. The irony is brutal. They spent years trying to prove you were dangerous or guilty, while the only danger in the equation was the reflection of their own fear. The quiet, the distance, the refusal to participate in their narrative. It all became unbearable because it left them with nothing to manipulate. And while they were consumed by the hunt, you were free. Your life was active, your mind was clear, your growth unstoppable. The more invisible you became to them, the louder your reality screamed. The absence that they treated as a weakness was actually your greatest strength. It demonstrated that power doesn't always roar. It sometimes walks silently, confidently, leaving obsession and paranoia to fill the void. Your presence could have intimidated, but your absence dismantled them entirely. That's the irony. They were hunting shadows while the real power was quietly living in plain sight. Number 4, they confused your peace with a hidden agenda. Calmness has a way of making people suspicious when they themselves are addicted to chaos. You weren't scrambling, panicking, or performing for anyone's approval. You weren't overreacting, exaggerating, or feeding drama for entertainment. You simply lived with quiet confidence and unshakable boundaries, and that was enough to make them paranoid. People who thrive on suspicion, gossip, and manipulation cannot compute someone who doesn't operate on their level of fear or obsession. To them, your peace didn't signal maturity or strength. It screamed concealment. They assumed if you weren't reacting the way they expected, you must be hiding something, scheming behind the scenes, or plotting a future revelation they weren't yet privy to. The truth is, your life wasn't a secret. It was just untouchable. You weren't performing or defending yourself because there was nothing to defend. Your clarity and composure exposed their own desperation. They tried to read motives where there were none because their world runs on suspicion. The quieter you are, the louder they imagine your agenda. Every calm choice, every unbothered moment, every boundary you held became, in their minds, evidence of some grand hidden plan. The irony is brutal. The absence of chaos became a weapon against them, a mirror reflecting how messy and insecure they actually were. They spent years interpreting stillness as strategy, misreading your control as manipulation. They hunted for cracks in your armor that never existed, desperate to justify their obsession. Your peace wasn't a plot, it was your power. While they were busy creating narratives, you simply lived. Their assumption that peace equals conspiracy reveals more about their fear than it does about you. Your calm was a threat because it showed them that life could exist outside the drama they depend on. And the most infuriating part for them? You never had to prove anything. You didn't need to clarify, justify, or explain. You moved through the world intact, consistent, untouchable. Their belief in a hidden agenda wasn't reality. It was projection. Your peace wasn't a secret. It was a demonstration that life lived on your terms will always be misread by those who can't escape their own chaos. Number 5. Their obsession was the biggest evidence of your power. The most revealing thing about someone who spends years chasing you isn't what they say or do. It's the fact that they can't stop. 8 years of fixation doesn't prove you did something wrong. It proves you mattered. Their obsession became a mirror reflecting your influence, your consistency, and your ability to exist beyond their control. Every call, every question, every rumor they spread wasn't about uncovering a crime. It was about grappling with a truth they couldn't handle. You were untouchable, and they knew it. Power doesn't always announce itself with loud gestures or dramatic victories. Sometimes power is quiet, unbothered, and consistent. And that quiet power is terrifying to people who thrive on chaos or validation. When someone obsesses over you, it's because you operate on a level they can't understand or access. Your decisions, your calm, your growth, they were all visible evidence that you weren't playing by their rules. And nothing unnerves insecure people more than a life that can't be dictated, manipulated, or predicted. Their obsession, in all its intensity, was an unintentional confession. It revealed their envy, their fear, and their inability to replicate what you had effortlessly mastered: control over your own life. The irony is exquisite. They spent years trying to catch you, yet every step they took only highlighted the gap between their chaos and your clarity. While they ran themselves in circles, You moved forward, untouched by their assumptions, unaffected by their narratives, and stronger with every passing year. This is the paradox of power. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to fight or prove yourself. True influence shows itself in how others respond to your presence or absence, their endless chasing, their sleepless scheming, their repeated failures to catch up. Those weren't signs of your weakness. They were undeniable evidence of your strength. The louder their obsession, the clearer the truth. Your power wasn't hidden. It was just far beyond their reach. And that is the reality that makes them frantic, irrational, and utterly obsessed while you continue living free. Number 6, you threatened the narrative. They built their identity on. Some people can't handle someone simply being who they are because it disrupts the story they've told themselves about the world and about themselves. They needed you to be a villain, a troublemaker, or someone flawed enough to make their own choices and beliefs feel justified. Your innocence, your consistency, and your strength didn't fit the narrative they constructed. You became a threat not because of anything you did, but because your reality refused to validate their fiction. Their identity was fragile, built on assumptions, biases, and half-truths, and you walked through it with clarity and authenticity that shattered their carefully constructed world. Every accusation, every rumor, every attempt to track or analyze you wasn't about evidence. It was about protecting themselves from a truth they couldn't face, that you didn't conform to the roles they needed you to play. People build entire lives around narratives that make them feel superior, justified, or safe. When someone exists outside that story, it challenges everything. You weren't just a character in their narrative. You were the real thing, the version they couldn't script, and they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle a life that didn't revolve around their expectations or need for control. The lengths they went to, 8 years of obsession, wasn't evidence of your guilt. It was evidence of their fear. They were terrified that if they allowed reality to exist without interference, they would have to confront their own failures, insecurities, and hypocrisies. They needed you to be guilty so they could remain comfortable in their illusions. Every attempt to trap you, expose you, or define you was really an attempt to stabilize themselves. And the cruel irony is that while they invested years trying to prove you, they were actually revealing the fragility of their own lives. Your presence, your integrity, and your refusal to fit into their story exposed the cracks in their character. You didn't break their identity, they revealed it themselves. You simply existed, and that existence was enough to dismantle the narrative they spent years desperately defending. In trying to control your story, they ended up exposing their own. Number 7, your evolution made their information expire. People cling to old versions of you because it's easier to control what they already know than to confront what they don't. They spent years collecting evidence, building theories, and memorizing patterns, assuming you would remain predictable, frozen in time, trapped in the same habits, mistakes, and responses. But life doesn't work that way. You evolved, you changed, you grew in ways they couldn't track, couldn't predict, and most importantly, couldn't understand. Every piece of information they gathered became irrelevant, outdated, a snapshot of a version of you that no longer existed. Their obsession with the past blinded them to the present. They thought they could corner you with history, assuming old actions defined the entirety of a person. But every moment you lived beyond their expectations invalidated their research. Every choice you made, every boundary you held, every decision to rise above, rendered their theories meaningless. The longer they obsessed, the more apparent it became. The person they were hunting wasn't even there anymore. And that's what terrified them. They were not chasing evidence, they were chasing an echo. Their frustration wasn't about catching you, it was about failing to map the current version of you. They wanted predictability, control, a narrative they could complete. But your evolution refused to be caged. It was dynamic, unpredictable, and unstoppable. You weren't stuck in their timeline, and that was a silent victory that no one could accuse you of winning. You simply lived, and your life outpaced their obsession. In truth, their fixation exposed their inability to adapt. While they were trapped in old facts, assumptions, and half-truths, you were moving forward, growing sharper, wiser, and stronger with every year. Their 8 years of effort became a monument to their stagnation, a testament to how easily someone who refuses to evolve can waste their life chasing shadows. You didn't need to fight, explain, or justify. Your evolution did all the work. And the more unreachable you became, the louder it screamed. You had moved beyond their world, and no amount of digging could ever catch up. Number 8, you didn't play the game they wanted you in. Some people live their lives as if every interaction is a chessboard, every word a move, every reaction a calculation. They expect everyone else to play by the same manipulative, reactive rules, and when someone refuses, it drives them insane. You didn't play, you didn't participate in their drama, you didn't perform for their judgment, and you didn't let their expectations dictate your behavior. That refusal broke their scripts. 8 years of obsession wasn't because you were dangerous, guilty, or suspicious. It was because you didn't respond in ways that fit the game they had imagined. By not playing, you became unpredictable. And unpredictability terrifies people who rely on control. They wanted to provoke, manipulate, or corner you into a reaction they could label, but you weren't in the arena they built. Your neutrality, your calm, and your self-possession became a puzzle they couldn't solve. Every attempt to push, test, or provoke you was met with nothing. And that nothing was devastating to them because it refused to feed their need for validation, drama, or proof. They weren't hunting evidence. They were hunting a reaction, and your refusal to give them one left them frantic. The beauty of not playing is that it exposes their obsession as what it really is, a reflection of their own weakness. They were desperate to control a narrative, to trap a person, to define your story. But you didn't hand it to them. You lived on your own terms, and that independence shattered their expectations. They doubled down, they lurked, they schemed, because their entire strategy relied on the assumption that you were just another player willing to engage in their rules. You weren't. And the quiet irony is brutal. They wasted years trying to catch you in a trap you never even entered. Your strength wasn't in confrontation, it was in refusal. Your power wasn't in argument, it was in detachment. Every obsession, every rumor, every wasted effort became proof that the game was theirs, and they lost because you simply refused to play. In that silence, in that refusal, you became untouchable, unstoppable, and completely untraceable. And that is a victory they could never understand. Number 9, your independence made them feel powerless. Nothing terrifies insecure people more than someone who refuses to be owned. Your independence wasn't loud or boastful. It was quiet, consistent, and undeniable. You made decisions for yourself, lived on your own terms, and didn't seek approval or validation. That simple act, which is natural for a person grounded in self-respect, became a threat to them. They spent 8 years trying to assert control over something that could never be controlled, not realizing that their obsession wasn't about you. It was about the power they lacked over themselves and the world around them. When someone is used to manipulating, controlling, or predicting others, encountering true independence is disorienting. They couldn't corner you, coerce you, or provoke the reaction they expected. Every boundary you set, every choice you made without regard for their expectations, chipped away at their sense of authority. And because they had invested so much energy into creating a narrative where they held power, Your refusal to participate made them desperate. Your life didn't revolve around them, and that realization was unbearable. Their obsession was proof not of your flaws, but of their fear. They chased what they couldn't control, tried to define what they couldn't measure, and built theories to justify the discomfort your freedom caused them. You weren't a problem. They just had nothing to hold on to, and for people addicted to dominance, that's intolerable. Their frantic attempts to corner you, to catch you in mistakes or weaknesses, revealed their own dependency on controlling others instead of mastering themselves. Meanwhile, your independence wasn't just resistance, it was strength. It was proof that life could be lived on your terms without apology, without compromise, and without fear. Every step you took outside their sphere of influence highlighted their limitations, exposing the fragility of their ego and the emptiness of their obsession. You didn't need to fight, argue, or prove yourself. Your independence did all the work, and the more they tried to control what couldn't be controlled, the clearer it became. They weren't hunting you. They were hunting the power they could never claim. Number 10, they mistook your silence for mystery, not maturity. Silence is often misread by people who live in chaos. When someone refuses to engage in unnecessary drama, they're labeled mysterious, secretive, or suspicious. That's exactly what happened with you. Your refusal to react, explain, or defend yourself was never about hiding something. It was about living with clarity and self-respect. But people obsessed with control and narratives can't comprehend that kind of quiet strength. Instead of seeing it as maturity, they projected their fears onto it, interpreting your calm as a hidden agenda, a secret plan, or some undisclosed truth waiting to be exposed. For 8 years, they spent energy assuming that your silence was a door to be forced open, rather than a boundary to be respected. Every unspoken word, every decision you made without justification, was misinterpreted as evidence of some hidden complexity they needed to decode. In reality, you weren't hiding. You were moving forward, making decisions, and growing without needing their validation. But their obsession required a story, and a person who refuses to feed the story becomes the ultimate puzzle, one that keeps them endlessly occupied while you remain untouched. The irony is sharp. They were trying to uncover what didn't exist, while you quietly built a life they couldn't manipulate or control. Their interpretation of your silence as mysterious was really a reflection of their own inability to handle authenticity. They wanted a reaction, a slip, a confession, anything to confirm their assumptions. But your calm, consistent, and principled behavior denied them that satisfaction, leaving them frustrated, paranoid, and desperate to find meaning where there was none. Your silence wasn't emptiness. It was armor. It wasn't avoidance. It was power. Every attempt they made to pry into your life only highlighted their obsession, showing just how much energy they wasted chasing shadows while you thrived in plain sight. You didn't need to explain, justify, or reveal anything, because true strength doesn't require an audience. Your quiet was enough, and it proved that while they were consumed by imagined mysteries, your life moved forward, untouchable and unshakable. Number 11, their curiosity exposed their jealousy. Curiosity can be innocent, even healthy, but when it turns into an 8-year obsession, it reveals something darker. In their case, it wasn't about understanding you. It was about trying to measure what they envied, control what they couldn't, and justify the gap between their lives and yours. The more time they spent digging, questioning, and scheming, the more obvious it became that their fixation wasn't driven by facts or evidence. It was driven by envy. They weren't investigating wrongdoing. They were trying to decode a life they secretly wished they could lead. Every action you took, every success, every calm and consistent decision became a mirror they couldn't handle. The things you achieved with focus, integrity, and clarity highlighted their stagnation. And instead of confronting their own shortcomings, they projected their frustration onto you, treating your life like a puzzle that needed solving. They wanted to reduce you to a story they could understand, control, or manipulate, because acknowledging your independence and growth would force them to face their own inadequacies. That's why they obsessed. They were jealous, and jealousy is often more persuasive than logic. Their attempts to track you, interpret your moves, and predict your behavior exposed more about them than it did about you. Every question, every rumor, every check-in was a confession. They couldn't compete with your consistency, your freedom, or your clarity. They didn't care about truth. They cared about being able to measure and manage what they couldn't possess. Your life, unbothered and unclaimed, became an unintentional spotlight on their own limitations. The irony is unmistakable. They spent years trying to uncover secrets or evidence, but the truth they were running from was right in front of them. You were living a life they secretly longed for, but lacked the courage, discipline, or self-awareness to achieve. Their obsession didn't diminish you, it magnified your influence. While they were consumed by envy, you were free to grow, evolve, and live exactly as you chose. Their curiosity, disguised as investigation, only revealed the depth of their jealousy, and the more they tried to control it, the more obvious it became that your life existed beyond their reach. Number 12. Your resilience made them feel uncomfortable with their weakness. Resilience is a quiet kind of power, and it terrifies people who rely on chaos, manipulation, or control to feel strong. You didn't crumble under pressure, you didn't bend to their expectations, and you didn't let fear dictate your choices. You simply endured, adapted, and kept moving forward. And that consistency, that refusal to be broken, became unbearable to them. 8 years of obsession wasn't about proving guilt. It was about their frustration at facing someone who could withstand what they themselves couldn't. Your resilience wasn't just a trait. It was a mirror reflecting their own weaknesses. And mirrors are uncomfortable when they don't lie. Every attempt they made to provoke, trap, or destabilize you failed. Each time you survived unscathed, it forced them to confront the fact that their power over you was an illusion. They expected panic, regret, or confusion. They expected cracks to appear in your confidence. Instead, they saw someone steady, composed, and unshakable. That stability highlighted their fragility, their reliance on manipulation, and their inability to face challenges without creating drama. In trying to attack you, they were repeatedly reminded of the very weaknesses they denied in themselves. Resilience doesn't need to make noise, and that's exactly why it's so infuriating to people obsessed with control. While they were consumed with tracking, analyzing, and scheming, your life continued without interruption. Every year that passed, every challenge you met without faltering, only amplified their discomfort. They weren't hunting evidence. They were hunting a crack in your armor that didn't exist. Their obsession became a testament to your strength, a record of their own inadequacy, and a vivid reminder that endurance cannot be faked, stolen, or manipulated. In the end, your resilience wasn't about proving them wrong or winning a battle. It was about living fully, unapologetically, and unbroken. And every frustrated attempt they made to destabilize you only confirmed it. While they wasted years consumed by obsession, you kept proving that real strength doesn't scream or fight. It survives, persists, and grows. That's the power they could never touch, and the truth they couldn't escape. Number 13. Your consistency destroyed their assumptions. Consistency is underrated, but it's one of the most disarming forces a person can possess. You didn't overreact, you didn't waver, and you didn't give them the drama they were expecting. You showed up the same way, day after day, grounded in your values and your truth. And that consistency dismantled every assumption they had spent years building. They had imagined you as unpredictable, guilty, or flawed, but you refused to fit the mold. Every calm, deliberate, and steady action you took was a silent statement that the narrative they created about you was nothing more than a fiction. For 8 years, they tried to map your behavior, to predict your moves, and to trap you in a story they controlled. They looked for inconsistencies, waiting for a mistake to justify their obsession. But the harder they searched, the more their theories fell apart. Your life didn't provide the chaos they needed. Your character didn't offer the cracks they expected. And that became their greatest frustration. Consistency isn't flashy. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. But it's almost impossible to argue with. Over time, it erodes every lie, every misconception, and every assumption. The real power of your consistency wasn't just in disproving them. It was in revealing their own inability to match it. While they were consumed with speculation, they couldn't see how predictable their own reactions were. Every rumor, every attempt to corner you, every obsession over details that didn't matter, highlighted their instability against your unshakable steadiness. You didn't need to argue or prove anything. You simply existed, consistently aligned with your values and reality, while they exhausted themselves chasing illusions. Consistency is quiet, but relentless. And that's why it's so infuriating to people obsessed with control. It doesn't negotiate with fear or envy. It just exists. Your steadiness wasn't a shield. It was a mirror reflecting their assumptions for what they were, fragile, flawed, and irrelevant to the person you had become. Every prediction they made failed, every expectation crumbled, and every theory collapsed because consistency doesn't lie. And that truth, simple, steady, undeniable, destroyed everything they thought they knew about you. Number 14, you became the chapter. They couldn't close. Some people spend years chasing a story that doesn't exist, but the real story isn't about the person they're hunting. It's about themselves. That was you. You weren't guilty, you weren't hiding, and you weren't their problem. Yet for 8 years, they acted as if you were the missing piece in a puzzle that would finally make their lives feel complete. The truth is, you became the chapter they couldn't close because your existence refused to conform to the neat, convenient ending they had written in their minds. You weren't a character in their story. You were living, evolving, and uncontainable, and that reality terrified them. Every attempt they made to define you, corner you, or label you failed. They tried evidence, rumors, manipulation, and even obsession itself, but nothing worked. The more effort they put into solving you, the clearer it became that their pursuit wasn't about justice, truth, or discovery. It was about filling a void in their own lives, about trying to complete a narrative that was always flawed because it started with fear and envy. You were never part of the problem. You were the silent reminder that they were incapable of closure because they hadn't faced their own shadows. The frustration they felt was a reflection of their own inner chaos. Your presence, or even your absence, highlighted how much of their life was spent on projection, judgment, and imagined control. They wanted a conclusion that would satisfy them, a neat ending where you finally fit into their perception. But life doesn't operate on scripts. You kept moving, growing, and existing authentically, making it impossible for them to finalize their story. And that's the real power you held. While they obsessed, you lived. While they scrambled for confirmation, you strengthened your foundation. While they wasted years hunting shadows, you became untouchable. You were never theirs to catch, define, or finish. You were a chapter they couldn't close, a lesson they couldn't learn, and a life they couldn't control. The more they tried, the more they revealed their obsession and their limits. while your existence quietly, undeniably, and completely surpassed everything they could ever imagine. Conclusion. After 8 years of obsession, hunting, and relentless scrutiny, the truth is crystal clear. You were never the target of wrongdoing. You were the reflection of their fear, envy, and inadequacies. Every attempt to control, define, or corner you only revealed more about them than it ever could about you. Your power lay not in confrontation, not in explanation, and not in drama. It lay in your calm, consistency, resilience, independence, and authenticity. Every silent boundary you held, every step forward you took, and every life choice you made outside their reach became a mirror exposing the cracks in their ego. They spent nearly a decade trying to write a story with you in it, but you refused to play the role they assigned. Your absence, your peace, your evolution, and your unwavering integrity made every assumption they held collapse. Their obsession, jealousy, and projections only amplified your influence while diminishing theirs. You didn't break under pressure, you simply lived beyond their control, untouched and unstoppable. You weren't a chapter to be concluded or a puzzle to be solved. You were the uncontainable truth that they could never grasp. The lesson here is brutal but liberating. When people obsess over you, it rarely reflects on your flaws. It reflects on their limitations. Your life, lived unapologetically, consistently, and independently, is a statement they can never argue with. The power of being untouchable isn't loud. It's in the quiet, in the refusal to participate in games, and in the ability to rise above obsession and fear. Your existence isn't a problem. It's proof of your freedom and strength. So remember this: live fully, stay consistent, hold your boundaries, and evolve relentlessly. Those who chase shadows will always reveal themselves, while you continue to thrive in plain sight. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep insights, like the video to show support. Comment your thoughts and experiences below, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the power of staying untouchable. Your presence matters. Let it shine. Stay blessed always.